What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Thursday, March the 6th, 2025. We got back-to-back episodes for you guys on consecutive days. So glad to be back here, and thank you so much for tuning in. Glad to have you guys along for another episode. And we got some good stories to get into today, some good developments on the Oregon front. And joining me is Justin Hopkins, owner and publisher of ScoopDuck. J-Hop, how we doing?
Good, yeah, good day, big day for Oregon fans and Oregon football, and then we've got some Oregon basketball on deck here pretty soon too as well.
Yeah, hoop season is heating up. I know that the Oregon men had a win over Indiana, and I think they've rattled off 6 straight now. And then I saw that the Oregon women actually fell to Indiana in the Big Ten tournament, so that's a bummer. Earlier on Thursday morning, but March Madness is coming up, not too far away, so that's always fun to watch and to follow. But the big story of the day, or the big report of the day, I should say, Justin, comes from Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellinger, who reports that Oregon and Dan Lanning have agreed on an amended 6-year contract that increases his annual pay by $2 million. The fully guaranteed deal averages nearly $11 million annually, a significant investment by the university, putting the 38-year-old into the top 5 nationally. So big news there, Justin, as Dan Lanning and the Ducks agree on a new contract extension. And I think this is a great development because for the longest time, you've covered Oregon longer than I have, but for the majority of my lifetime, it's felt like stability and continuity at the top of the football program has just escaped Oregon, just kind of slipped past their fingertips. Obviously, Mario Cristobal and Willie Taggart are the most recent examples, but you have Chip Kelly and his predecessors that were there for quite some time. So, but let's dive into this. What's your kind of initial reaction to this development?
Yeah, I mean, initial reaction, kind of before I dig into it, is just, I mean, obviously it's perfect. For Oregon, it's perfect for Dan Lanning. The two sides continue to show a commitment to one another. I think that one of the things here that Oregon values, obviously, of course, the performance on the field and all those things are critical to this. But I think one of the other things that Oregon seems to value is that even though Dan Lanning's name comes up in some coaching, opportunities or whatever, he doesn't seem to push the envelope, right? And I think that what I mean by that is he can't control, outside people bringing up his name and saying, hey, watch for Dan Lanning, watch for Dan Lanning. But you don't see him and his agent really pushing that narrative and maybe bringing it back to Oregon like, hey, look, we've got this going on. And I say that because I think that was a rift that went between Oregon and Mario Cristobal, because as we know, when Mario Cristobal was at Oregon, his name would pop up for, multiple opportunities every year. And it seemed like that got used as leverage between the two sides to, negotiate a new deal. And I understand how that works. I'm not mad about how it works, but it seems as though Dan Lanning doesn't really let that become an issue. And I think Oregon's rewarding him for that, saying, hey, look, we appreciate not having to go through this with you every year just because your name popped up on the Auburn job search or whatever the case might be. We're obviously thrilled with your performance on the field, the direction of the program. And it just shows Oregon's in it for the long haul. They're committed to football. They're committed to winning. And that's what you want. And it's refreshing because I think we've kind of everything happens in cycles or waves, whether it's political or sports or whatever. And I think that for a long time, and you said it, you talk about Bellotti, you talked about Rich Brooks, even Chip Kelly was here for a bit. Those guys showed up and stayed for a long time, and there was tons of continuity, right? Even when the head coach changed, not very many of the pieces below it changed. So there was a lot of continuity. And for the last 10 years, last decade of college football, it seems as though that is completely not the norm, and everybody's changing coaches every 2 or 3 years. And it's kind of refreshing to see Oregon say, nah, we want to commit to Dan Lanning long term. Feels like Lanning is reciprocated that. And it feels like that they've built this thing, for the long haul. And you got to love that if you're a Duck fan.
You certainly do. It feels like just yesterday we were watching that video where Dan Lanning was talking about, I want to be in Eugene for as long as Eugene will have me, and then the graphic that came on the screen in that video was, if you're worried about your head coach leaving, come play for the Ducks, or something to that effect, right? It was just an epic 1 minute, short and sweet announcement that racked up millions of views across various social media channels. So Oregon and Oregon fans have to love the spot that they're in with Dan Lanning. 35-6 record in his first 3 seasons with the Ducks, a Big Ten championship, 3 top 10 recruiting classes, major contenders in the transfer portal for top talent every single offseason. So, short of winning a national title, which of course is Oregon's biggest focus, I don't know what else you could really ask for from Dan Lanning. Maybe you can ask for those wins against Washington when Kalen DeBoer was there. I think that's probably going to be the biggest tension point or biggest disappointment. And I use air quotes here on the YouTube channel because I think not beating a specific rival, as we've seen with Ohio State and Michigan over the past couple of years, right? Or not winning a national championship. If you're not doing one of those two things, it seems like it's getting easier and easier for fans to be like, this coach isn't cutting it, or we need to get rid of this guy. But it's like, how many coaches could you really say would be an automatic upgrade over Dan Lanning? He is just crushing it at Oregon, has having incredible success, and has really done a really good job just building Oregon to be competitive for the foreseeable future. And obviously we know that Phil Knight, Rob Mullins, and the rest of the higher ups there in Eugene are a big reason why that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. The ultimate benchmark is Nick Saban and his career, right? Everybody wants to hire Nick Saban, who either wins or competes for national championships 7 out of 10 years, or whatever the number was. It was obviously a hell of a run by Nick, and very possibly will never be duplicated. But that's why he's one of the best that's ever done it. And I think if you're Oregon, your realistic expectation, if you're any school, but your realistic expectation should be, we just want a program that continues to compete for a national championship every year. If your goal is to win a national championship every year, and that's the benchmark, it's unattainable. It's not going to happen. Like, that's the pie in the sky. And yeah, you want to win one. And of course, Dan Lanning hasn't done that, but he's knocking on the doorstep every year. I mean, they're, a couple of 3-point losses to Washington one year. You never know what might happen if Oregon wins one of those or both of those. Last year, obviously, Oregon went 13-0 and ran into the eventual winner that was a buzzsaw that obviously played its best football all year when it mattered most. And Oregon came in sluggish with the layoff. Like, you look at those things and, if you're Oregon, you're like, okay, yeah, we want to win, but I mean, our guy's doing everything he can to get us to those points. And so they're rewarding that. So if you're a fan that says, yeah, well, he hasn't won anything, he hasn't won the big game yet. Well, I can assure you of this. Okay. The alternative is probably not nearly as good as Dan Lanning. And there's probably only about 2 or 3 coaches in college football right now that could duplicate what Dan Lanning's doing at Oregon. So there's nothing to chase. There's no, like, hey, let's go get this guy. There's no, it's like, I don't know what you're after. So I think Oregon sees that clearly, that Rob Mullins and Phil Knight and everybody's got Dan Lanning's back. They appreciate what he's doing. I appreciate what he's doing. It's a whole lot more fun to write about 10-win seasons and 13-win seasons than 6, 7, 8-win seasons. So again, I think the commitment to the two sides puts Oregon in a position to be successful long term. We know Oregon's aggressive on the NIL front. Having the stability is a really great thing. The stability not only of Dan Lanning, but his coaching staff underneath him and his personnel staff. And right now in today's college football, where kids can jump in the transfer portal on a Tuesday just because they frickin' feel like it, that stability is going to lead to long-term success of the program. Those coaches are going to stay. More players are going to want to stay. And that's kind of where college football is headed. Again, these things are going to start being treated more like NFL operations versus a college program. And that's, again, that's what, and now, you got Oregon with a really good head coach and a really good general manager in place. They're built for the long haul.
And what you were talking about with the stability point and just the benefits that come with that. I remember a year ago, I was doing interviews with recruits and I was getting those quotes about part of, I asked them, what stands out to you about Oregon, or what's the biggest thing that has you interested in the Ducks? And some of the answers I was getting was along those lines of, I know that Dan Lanning's going to be there for a long time, because we are in a point in college football where it's like, I don't know, 5 schools maybe that have that stability. Well, I mean, I think you have some young coaches that are doing really well, but I think now it looks like, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas with Sark. I mean, there's just not that. Feel free to chime in if I'm missing any here, but there's just not that
Clemson's probably
many.
the only other one.
Clemson.
Clemson. And I would say it about Michigan, but not quite yet. I think Sherrone Moore is going to be okay, but Notre Dame's obviously a lot more invested in Marcus Freeman after this run. And for whatever reason, Penn State remains committed to James Franklin. Not my deal, but but you're right. Those are about it.
Yeah, so I think that the stability and having a guy that's super bought in is just going to continue to the returns on that are great. And the trajectory of the Oregon program is just as good and as bright as it's ever been. You look at the record that they've had since he's gotten there: 10-3, 12-2, 13-1. That's, even though you're not having a national championship in those years, it's still steady improvement. And I was talking to somebody today, and it kind of made me think about something too, just the aspect of culture at a program and how long it takes to implement that. The longer that he sticks around and continues to build this culture, then you're at a point where it's not even the coaches are the ones that have to enforce it, or the personnel people are the ones that have to enforce it, but the players are holding each other accountable and holding themselves up to that standard, and the value that comes with that. I don't know if you can put a dollar amount on that or really put it into perspective, but when you have everybody on the same page and operating at the same level and chasing a common goal, it's something that really helps set you apart from some of these other programs that are chasing that mark, and in some instances chasing Oregon or these other teams at the top of the sport.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Culture matters, and unfortunately, you can get a coach in there and try and enforce a culture, but it just doesn't work that way. You've got to have buy-in from the players. They've got to believe what you're selling. And once they know they do, you've got, like you said, you get the guys, and I know I wrote about this, but you get the guys that you recruit out of high school, and they come to your program for 3 to 4 years, year in and year out. Those are the people that, those players then teach the players that come in behind them the way, right? Hey, this is how we do things at Oregon. You either get in line or maybe find someplace else because it won't work for you. And that's the culture that you put in place. And those players, as you keep them there and the coaches stay there, the expectation remains the same, right? Hey, we've got a high level expectation. Here's what it is. That's going to bleed over and just carry over. And to your point, that's a lot of what's going on here at Oregon right now. And I will say this, as far as recruiting goes, we know Dan Lanning's an excellent recruiter. You have all these things. You've got to be competitive on the NIL front. But NIL is not everything, except for a few outlier cases. And you could look and see like cases where players probably went somewhere because they went to the highest bidder. I believe when you look at Oregon and probably Georgia and maybe a few programs anymore, and Alabama when Nick Saban was there, you look at a few of those programs, and yes, they need to be competitive in the NIL market, but they don't need to outright be the top bidder for players because of the stability and the product on the field, and now the development of guys going to the NFL. If you can prove that you've done these things, kids are going to come to you and play for you and say, hey, look, you weren't necessarily my best NIL offer. Like, you weren't the top amount, but your offer was fair, and you've got all these other things. I'm happy to take that generous offer, knowing that I'm going to get that money and it's good enough for me, and these other things are taken care of. So, to me, everybody looks at, why does USC have such good recruiting in the spring? Well, they're a perfect example of basically they've got to offer more money to get these guys to commit right now. Now, somebody may come in and offer more money behind them, or just might hit the exact same number. We saw Georgia take a couple of USC's top guys last year, and I would go ahead and wager Georgia did not outbid USC for those players, but they were able to say, hey, look, we're close to home. Look at all the guys we send to the league on defense, whatever. Kirby Smart's been here. He's proven it. He's won national championships. Those things all make your recruiting efforts a lot easier. So I love that. I think Oregon, and I don't mean Dan Lanning, I think the power-ups, the board of trustees, I love that they're aware of that, knowing that their investment here with Dan Lanning and keeping him in that continuity and that stability helps them on the recruiting trail, not necessarily have to be the top offer for certain players around the country.
And that's another, I guess, step in the evolution of Oregon recruiting that I'm super excited to see, is just how much weight that NFL factor is going to continue to carry or will carry in the future, because we know Oregon's competitive in the NIL front. That's I mean, we'd be stupid to say Oregon's poor and they can't afford what they're like, come on. But the proof is in the pudding, and it's becoming more and more evident every year that they have Lanning. And one of the points I wanted to add here, and it'll kind of segue us into our next topic here, Justin. Another thing that I don't think gets talked about enough when you look at a contract extension situation like this is how effectively Lanning has navigated the coaching departures and the coaching hires. Because I think that Mario Cristobal was pretty good at that when he was at Oregon. I don't think every hire was, an ace hire or a home run hire. And I think that gets thrown around way too loosely and freely in today's football media, sports media. But Lanning's done a pretty darn good job at navigating those moves when they need to be made. And that's something that I think commands top dollar, especially when you're in a situation like Lanning where you're a younger head coach and you maybe don't have the most established coaching tree in the world and, as many contacts necessarily. I'm not saying that Lanning doesn't have a lot of contacts. That tree keeps growing, but he has done a phenomenal job at making those moves when he's had to. And it goes back to his intro press conference, I want to say, when he said, while I was at Georgia or these other stops, I had my list of guys that I was assembling for when this opportunity came. So it all goes back to just what Lanning's made of and how everything has been building to this point in his career. And it's been really fun to watch.
Well, and as a head coach, you wear a ton of hats. Let me back up. You're right. Mario Cristobal had mixed results. He had some great hires. He had some hires that he probably would like to, have a do-over. So far, Dan Lanning's pretty much hit the mark on almost every hire, depending on how you see it. But as a head coach, you wear many hats, right? You've got to recruit. You've got to develop. You've got a scheme. You've got a game plan. All those. You have performance on the field. You got to make sure these guys are getting their grades right. You got to make sure these guys aren't getting in trouble when they're not on the football field. Like, you have so many different hats. You've got to hire guys, fire guys, personnel, go out and do golf events so you can, shake hands with the fans. And there's a lot of hats that these guys have to wear. And, you look at all the hats that Dan Lanning has, and it's like, okay, where's the shortcoming? Where's the chink in the armor? Where's he not getting it done? I don't know. He's winning on the football field. He's sending guys to the league. There have been a couple cases of guys getting in trouble, but for the most part, there hasn't been a lot of, criminal activity in Eugene. Certainly not the number of reckless driving citations that we see in Georgia. Not even close. But I mean,
what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, but Dale and Austin and a couple things that have come up, and I know that's pending. So, I'm not saying that was trouble, but there's been very little drama off the field. And so just, all these things, he's really checking all the boxes. He's young. He's got a long ways to go. It's awesome. It's a great spot for Oregon to be. And I'm really glad that they did this, because when you're aggressive like this on the Oregon side, it keeps the other schools away, right? I mean, you're really going to have to be serious about hiring Dan Lanning at this point if you're going to come after him. There's a massive, $20 million plus whatever the buyout is. It's a monster. And then, of course, you're going to have a bunch of money on top of that. It's just, you have to pay him, I don't know, what's the number, 12, 13, $14 million a year to make him your coach. I mean, that's pretty unbelievable. So I love the commitment from the university to say, hey, look, We know we've got a great guy, and we want to make sure that, there's really only about 2 schools that could probably afford to come after him at this point. And kudos to them for basically saying, we're going to take the drama right out of this thing.
Yeah, it's like you don't have to be reactive when you're proactive. So Oregon didn't wait for this to become a problem. They got out in front of it and rewarded Dan Lanning for the tremendous results that he's brought to the program. So let's segue. Oh,
hang on. And you know what? And it's cheaper that way. It's cheaper when you do that, because the worst thing in the world is to have Alabama, whatever, just hypothetical. You have Alabama say, hey, like, we really want Dan Lanning, and them to throw a $14 million offer on the table. Obviously, you're going to have to pay more if you want to keep him, right? So instead of even allowing that $14 million offer to come to the table, you've said, hey, look, let's keep this thing going. Let's make him a really fair market, value offer, and let's keep those offers away. I'm going to forget to say this, so I got to say it now. I don't remember where you were going to segue next, so maybe this fits and maybe it doesn't. But I do find it coincidental that it's Thursday and this news comes out, and guess who comes on campus starting tomorrow? Just
Jared
saying.
Curtis.
Just saying. One of your very, very top, if not your absolute very top recruits, is set to visit this weekend, and you announce this news. Coincidence?
I don't know. It could be. It could be. But that'll be a visit that we're tracking very closely throughout the weekend. Of course, Jared Curtis, 5-star quarterback out of Nashville Christian out there in Tennessee, #1 quarterback in the 2026 class. Is this Oregon's answer to USC flipping Jonas Williams away from the Ducks? Last topic for us here today, Justin. We have some other coaching news as Dan Lanning promoted a number of the staffers in Eugene. And I think the biggest one that we can kind of lead off here with is Drew Maringer, who has been tabbed the new co-offensive coordinator. This, of course, a decision that Lanning had to make following the departure of Junior Adams to become the Dallas Cowboys wide receivers coach. And then the other ones that we can talk about here, you got Rashad Wadood finally getting that cornerbacks coach tag, something that we can talk about more, and I'm very keen to talk about. Cameron Aragi got the edge coach's position, and then Koa Kai got the assistant quarterbacks coach tag. We know that he is a former Oregon tight end himself, so nice to see a former Duck making a move up the coaching ranks.
Well, and all these guys have been here and put in their time. Like, these aren't guys that just showed up a month ago and all of a sudden they're getting these are, hey, Dan Lanning's rewarding these guys for the hard work because they've been a part of these, national championship efforts, these 10-win seasons, these 13-win seasons. And I knew, a lot of fans off the cuff give Drew Maringer a lot of heat. Really wish you guys would stop. I mean, I like, go back and listen to the cinematic recaps, and go back and listen to how many times Drew Maringer's voice is on the mic as they're making a play call that goes for a big play or touchdown or first down or whatever the case might be. It's clear that he is a part of the scheming and the game planning offensively. It doesn't mean he's doing the job. I'm not discrediting Will Stein, but it's clear that his input is valued and has made an impact on this team's success. So, I know he hasn't always hit the mark on recruiting, and I understand that, but you got to look at the big picture here. I mean, right now you got the #1 tight end committed in your class, and you're potentially looking at the #2 recruit, Mark Bowman, being committed to you as well. That's a top target for Oregon, and as last I checked, you're the last official visit for him in June. So, I mean, he's got Oregon in great shape where they need to be. Might be a little bit light on depth at the tight end position right now, but I mean, it's a guy that helped you bring Kenyon Sadiq to town, who last I checked is a pretty good player. And all his guys have been performing and developing. So I think Terrence Ferguson's looking at, possibly sliding into the second round. That probably is a bit opportunistic, but still, that's a really good move for him, even if he's in the third round. So, I think that one to me, I highlight. I know you're a big Rashad Wadood fan, and I am too. Coach Wadood's a real one, and his ties into California are absolutely massive for this staff. Not just in the cycle. I don't say that because of the 26 cycle. He's not just a tie to cornerbacks and safeties. His relationships have opened the doors for Oregon to recruit the state of California a lot. So again, another guy that totally deserved this promotion or whatever you want to call it. And I just love to see that Dan Lanning rewards the guys that hang around and put in the time.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah. The last thing I would just add on with Maringer was, Terrence Ferguson was such a staple of the Oregon offense for a while. And it's because of Drew Maringer that you're in a position now where it's like you're not sweating bullets going into 2025. You have a guy who could be the best athlete, the best pure athlete on Oregon's team as your kind of new face of the tight end room. And he is just coming along super nicely. And then I'm also excited to see what Jamari Johnson can do coming over from Louisville as a guy that I covered when he was coming out of Inglewood High School. But I wanted to also add, I didn't want to gloss over this. Cutter Leftwich is coming back to Oregon as an assistant offensive line coach under Alik Terry. This, of course, comes after Mike Cavanaugh was hired away by Oregon State, which is probably the only job that he would have taken, given just kind of where he's at in his life and how important it is to have his family around. He's always posting about his grandkids and how important that is to him. So I think this gives Oregon some continuity because Cutter Leftwich was on the staff, obviously, not too long ago. And then I'll just add a little bit more here about Wadood. I think that promotion is super important because of how hard USC came after him when they were looking for a new cornerbacks coach to hire in Los Angeles. And we just talked about all the important ties that he has to the LA area. So for them, they got to be looking like, hey, this is a guy that can come back home and kind of help us get back on the map and all of that. But I think it says a lot about Wadood that he chose to stay and really is bought into the bigger picture and all the guys that he's recruited at Oregon and having a chance to now be that on-field title and that on-field coach for them. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. That dude's last name is like royalty on the football scene down here in LA and Southern California. So being able to keep him as an up-and-comer on the staff is tremendously valuable. So I'm really happy with how all of this promotion stuff has gone for Oregon, and I think it's just going to help them keep churning.
Yeah, I mean, like we led off the show with talking about Lanning, the stability and continuity. As much of that as you can do from the personnel room to the assistant coaching staff to the on-field staff to the head coach, all that stuff matters. And so you look at Oregon and the way it's positioned, they're set up for long-term success, and that's all you can ask for at this point. I mean, obviously Phil Knight's a big reason, for the success and having the revenue to be able to do this. And even, Phil's getting up in years, even should he pass, I'm sure there are things put in place that allow us for this continued success. So, hopefully it all comes together and Phil's able to enjoy the fruits of his labor. Let's put it that way.
Hopefully that's why we have another season to cover. And honestly, that's like the big question that looms large every season until they can pull it off. Is this going to be the year that Oregon can get it all done? And certainly we think that Rob Mullins thinks and believes that Dan Lanning, is the guy that can get them over that hump and take them all the way. But I think that'll do it for us here, Justin, on today's episode of the pod. I know you got a flight to catch later on this evening, so we'll make sure that we wrap this one up. But if you guys want to find more Justin, you can follow him on X at JHopkinsSD. You can find me anywhere at MTorres Sports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck On 3 YouTube channel. Come and see us at ScoopDuck.com. You can try us out for a week. That's 7 days for just $1. And you can sign up for the Duck Station newsletter as well, so you get all the latest news sent right to your inbox. And check out the On3 app so that you don't miss out on anything Oregon Ducks related. We keep you guys up to date on everything. But until next time, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.